Hey guys, tonight we tiptoe into the halls of a Roman villa just before the lamps are lit. When the floor is swept, the figs are sliced, and somewhere behind the drapes and beside the wine jars a servant begins crumbling bread. Not for snacking, not for birds, but to assign power. Yes, you're about to discover that in ancient Rome, your seat at dinner wasn't marked with a name card. It was marked with crumbs. You just had to know how to read them. Marble floors stretch cool beneath your bare feet as you tread through the villa's atrium. The air smells faintly of olive oil, charcoal, and that particular musty freshness of linens left in sun-drenched courtyards. You're not a guest. You're not even family. You're one of the familia, the household staff, the people who make things happen without ever being seen. And tonight, your job is crumbs. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You kneel beside the triclinium, the formal dining room with its U-shaped arrangement of couches, and pull out the day's seating bread from a cloth bundle, a sour rye, half a honeyed loaf, and 2 crusty barley buns. There's no checklist, no parchment. You just know. Each guest has a designated type of bread based on their status, history, and what they said last time they came drunk to dinner. Tonight, Gaius Cassius is coming, and he's got a reputation for elbowing senators out of better seats. He gets the dense barley crust, positioned just slightly behind the salt tray. A subtle demotion. You place the crumb there, pinched into a slanted line like a miniature road. Bread, in this world, is more than food. It's code. Each loaf, variety barley, rye, wheat, millet carries silent meaning. Barley for senators who've fallen out of favor. Rye for military men. Spiced wheat loaves with embedded dates for those recently granted favors by the emperor. Even the shape matters. A sharp edge on the crust means defender of tradition. A round, soft roll says, safe, forgettable. Please don't offend anyone. This isn't common knowledge. The guests never admit they notice. That would spoil the game. But they know. When Marcus Vibius walked in last month and found only the broken heel of a millet roll near the back couch, he left before the oysters were served. Word is, he sold his family farm 2 days later. Coincidence? You don't think so? One servant long ago supposedly tried to invent edible ink to label the crumbs. Didn't end well. Ink poisoning at a wedding feast. Now, it's all done by hand. Crumble, tilt, press. You use the back of a silver spoon to flatten one wedge of bread to indicate a political scandal. For another guest, you tear a small bite out to remind him of a debt unpaid. The crumbs speak for you. Hey, you. They whisper across linen. Historians still argue whether this practice was born out of actual dining shortage, or whether it began as a prank and snowballed into a subtle but universal language of power. One theory claims it started with a clever hostess named Drusilla, who didn't want to offend anyone by overt assignments, so she let the servants drop breadcrumb clues instead. Another insists it was just a nervous baker improvising after place cards got wet. Either way, the crumbs stayed. For decades, you hear the front gates open, a creak of sandal on marble. Showtime. You place the final wedge of burnt bread on the far left couch reserved for Lucius, who always talks too much about gladiators and once insulted your fig compotes. You press the crumb in with the tiniest smear of olive paste. A quiet jab. He'll sit, he'll wonder, but he'll never accuse. And that's the beauty of it. The light dims. As evening candles flicker into life, you smooth your tunic, bow your head, and step back into the shadows. Job done. For now, and just before you leave the room, you catch sight of a mouse watching you from under the couch. It twitches, smells bread, moves toward the crust meant for the senator's cousin. You freeze. You whisper, not tonight, little thief, and reach for the emergency crumb, a decoy, crushed into powder. Useless for signaling, perfect for feeding. Even in the empire of bread, you still have to feed the shadows. You're back in the kitchen now, but not to cook. The others are busy boiling lentils and cursing at the olive press. But you've got a different task: decoding the texture hierarchy. It's not just the type of bread that matters: softness, moisture, even the shape of the loaf all play roles in this ancient seating ballet. You cradle a small tray in your hands, lined with a damp cloth. On it sit 7 miniature loaves, each barely the size of a fig. Each one was baked in the late morning, left to cool in different ways. One dried in the sun, one was covered in lambskin, one was brushed with wine. Why? Because they each signal something different to someone trained to notice. Soft and spongy. That's a mark of rising fortune. Fresh dough for fresh connections. Crumbly, dry, and cracked. That usually gets dropped in front of someone whose family just lost a lawsuit. You place your thumb against the crust of a particularly dark roll. It gives just slightly resilient, but not soft. You nod. Perfect for Publius. He's been groveling for attention from the governor, and tonight, he'll think he's made progress. You brush the edges with a hint of oil to give it shine. Presentation matters. The shine says we see you. The weight says we remember. You place it aside. It's absurd. Really, how much meaning is placed in baked wheat and barley? But it's no more absurd than wearing gold pins on one side of your toga to say you support one senator over another. Roman society thrives on unspoken statements, and bread, ever since it became state-subsidized, has gone from pantry staple to political symbol. It's edible etiquette. Some historians argue the bread seating system evolved from earlier Etruscan rituals involving salted loaves used in funerals. Others think it came straight from the Republic's obsession with categorization. If every senator had a ring, a robe, a rank, why not a loaf? Of course, there are fringe thinkers who claim it all began with a poorly planned Saturnalia feast, where someone accidentally sat in the wrong place, and a bloody brawl broke out over who got the last honeyed dormouse. That's how these things start: one bad party, two stubborn egos, and suddenly, you've got a whole generation of servants memorizing flour codes. You run your finger along a cooled rye roll. It crumbles too easily. No good. You toss it aside. Too many bad omens around crumbling bread. You'd rather get caught misplacing a wine jug than serve a flaking crust to a tribune. In the corner, young Philo. He's barely 10. More nose than teeth, watches you with the intensity of someone trying to figure out how the moon works. He asks, quietly, "Is that one for a good man or a bad one?" You smile. "Depends who's chewing." Philo nods solemnly. As if that's wisdom he'll keep folded in his tunic forever. You hand him the broken rye. "Feed this to the stable goat." He beams, like you've given him gold. That's how it begins. Always with little hands learning the weight of wheat. Elsewhere in the villa, cushions are being fluffed. Jugs uncorked. Torches checked for wax drips. But only you carry the map of the room in your head. You know who can't sit next to whom, who cheated whom last spring, who once insulted the host's cousin and now must be seated close enough to hear the jokes, but far enough to not be included in them. And the bread. The bread tells the truth no one dares say aloud. You've worked out a system, a kind of edible language. Round loaves mean loyalty. Sharp-edged crusts mean conflict. Airy, empty rolls. That's for guests who love to talk and say nothing. You once got away with putting a stale end piece in front of a particularly smug poet. He sniffed it and said, "Ah, rustic authenticity." No idea he'd just been subtly insulted. That's the thing, people will always assign their own meaning to what they want to see. Your job is just to give them the canvas. Tonight, though, there's a new guest. One you've never baked for. A visiting official from the provinces, no title, but he's here on business. Nobody's told you much, just that he's dangerous if insulted and boring if pleased. The worst kind of man. You take a gamble. A mid-tier wheat loaf, crust brushed with honey and pepper, pinched at both ends. A neutral loaf, no praise, no scorn, just potential. You wrap it in fig leaf and mark it with a sesame seed. Your own signature, invisible to everyone else. The tray is ready, you exhale. From behind the curtains, you hear laughter start to ripple through the atrium. Guests have begun to arrive. Togas rustle, bronze sandals scuff marble. The house stirs. You take up your tray and walk slowly toward the triclinium. 7 loaves, 7 positions, 7 quiet judgments wrapped in flour. And not a single guest will ever know who sat where because of you. You glide into the triclinium like smoke, Quiet, practiced, invisible. The couches are set in a perfect U, draped with deep red linens. The center table already groans under the weight of tonight's first-course eggs in pine vinegar, steamed turnips, and those cursed stuffed dormice you personally think taste like socks. But the food isn't your concern. Not yet. Your fingers are full of flour. Now, seating. The windows face west, catching the amber glow of the setting sun, and that matters. Light equals power. Guests seated with their faces to the light look more glorious, more trustworthy. Those against the shadows, forgettable, or worse, suspect. You run through the configuration again in your mind. Guest rank, politics, gossip trajectories, and of course, the lamp drip line. Because you remember last week, when a drop of olive oil from a hanging lamp fell directly onto a general's sleeve. The general assumed it was a bad omen, left early, spent the next morning praying at 3 temples. No one told him the real omen was the burnt millet crust you'd placed beside his elbow. So tonight, you reposition the oil lamp just slightly. It swings now, harmlessly, over the seat for Lucius the boaster. He won't notice, and if he does, he'll probably think the gods are weeping for joy. Back to Crumbs. You place a wedge of millet near the host's brother, a man who claims to despise politics but somehow ends up in every key conversation. You angle the bread slice so it leans slightly toward the wine tray, a signal to the pourers to keep his goblet full. Drunk men reveal alliances. And forget insults. Next, you drop a soft wheat knot behind the couch leg closest to the senator's mistress. It's faint, nearly invisible, but she'll see it. Women like her notice everything. She'll interpret the choice as inclusion, a soft nod, perhaps even an apology for last month's seating scandal. Of course, it's not really for her. It's a message to the senator. We remember, but we're letting it go. You move to the edge of the room, where the lesser guests will sit, the ones who weren't really invited, but couldn't be excluded without causing whispers. You place a dry corner of rye by the leftmost cushion. Its color, a dull brown-gray, the same shade as the floor tile, almost invisible. That's the point. Some historians claim that entire sections of Rome's elite social structure were maintained through acts like this: micro-adjustments in lighting, crumb placement, and cushion depth. No laws, no declarations, just gestures, like emperors who twitched a pinky and watched 100 men panic. Of course, not everyone agrees. Some scholars argue there's no real evidence for these practices, breadcrumbs as a seating code. They scoff. Ridiculous. But if you ever watched an honored guest go pale at the sight of a broken crust or witnessed a hostess fume when her guest sat over a sesame cluster meant for someone else, you'd know. Oh, you'd know. At your side. Philo reappears with a question. What if someone sits on the wrong bread? You pause. Brush a speck of flour from your fingers. Then we pretend they were meant to. He frowns. Even if it ruins everything. You smile, especially if it ruins everything. Because the illusion of control is sometimes more important than control itself. These guests, they cling to certainty. They read meaning into tablecloth folds and interpret coughs as commentary. They need to believe someone is steering the evening. You just give them something to decode. Behind you, someone sneezes, a servant, nervous. You whisper a prayer to Mercury, god of messages and mischief, and finish the last crumb. This one is special. The visiting official from the provinces, you place his sesame-tipped roll on the middle couch, third cushion. Prime viewing position but flanked by 2 rivals. You're baiting him, slightly, seeing where he'll lean, literally, and if he shifts right, toward Gaius, that means alliance. If he turns left, ambition. If he eats the bread before being served, arrogance. This is the test. Your tray is now empty. You nod to yourself. The room smells of citrus oil and rising tension. In a moment, the guests will enter. In a moment, the game begins. But for now, you wait in the dark edge of the curtain, watching your crumb map sit silently under fading sunlight. 7 loaves, 7 fates. The guests will think they chose their seats. But you'll know better. You don't hear the guests enter, you feel them. The shift in the air, the heat of too many perfumes clashing like drunk gladiators, the rustle of layered togas, the soft slap of sandals on mosaic tile. You stay hidden behind a curtain embroidered with ivy leaves, watching through the gap where the thread has come loose. One by one, they trickle into the triclinium, blinking in the warm lamplight, pretending not to glance at where others are sitting. But they're watching, always. Lucius the boaster scans the couches first, sees the lamp dripping in his direction, frowns slightly. You hold your breath, then he grins, thinking the glistening oil above him is a tribute, a blessing. He takes the seat proudly. You exhale. One down. The senator's mistress enters next, trailing laughter like a perfume of her own. She spots the soft wheat knot under her cushion, and oh, there it is. Her chin lifts. You can almost hear her think, they remembered me. She adjusts her robe just enough to let the others see her confidence. She hasn't sat down yet, but she already knows she's won something. Then comes the moment you've been waiting for. The provincial official. No insignia, no entourage. Just a man with quiet shoes and eyes like boiled lentils, plain, unassuming, but unsettlingly calm. He pauses at the entrance, surveys the room like he's memorizing the exits. Then he moves toward his assigned couch, third cushion, prime middle. He sits, doesn't even blink at the sesame-tipped loaf. Then he picks it up and eats it. Immediately, just bites it, like it's a bread roll at a market stall. You almost drop your curtain. Around him, others glance. But no one dares comment, not allowed. Still, the signal is clear. He doesn't care about the system, or he's pretending not to care, which is worse. Philo appears beside you again, whispering, "Is that bad?" You nod slowly. Very. In the crumb world, eating the signal is like tearing up your invitation and licking the ink. It says, "I see your game. I choose not to play," which is dangerous, because it means he's either bluffing, or worse, he really doesn't need your favor. That's the kind of man who breaks systems just to see if anyone notices. Still, the room holds. Conversation begins. Someone coughs. Someone else laughs too loudly. The wine boy trips slightly, recovers, no disasters yet. But across the room, you catch the host's expression. He's watching the official too, not with amusement, with calculation. And now the real game begins. You glance toward the leftmost couch, dry rye crust beside the cushion, barely visible. The man sitting there is chewing absent-mindedly on an olive and not speaking. That's your ghost seat, the one no one wants, but someone always ends up in. Tonight, it's a lawyer who backed the wrong bill last month. He'll realize it by dessert. Historians still debate how aware Romans truly were of these unspoken codes. Some say the elite played dumb, but memorized every crumb. Others argue only the servants understood the full system. But there's a growing theory that even the emperors, even the gods etched into marble, once judged men by their bread. There's a scroll in the Library of Alexandria that supposedly mentions bread-framed justice. It's long lost. Of course, fire, mold, time, all the usual villains. But rumor says it compared court seating arrangements to bread trays at a feast, where the crustiest corner belonged to the guilty. Fiction. Maybe, but you've seen enough to know. Crumbs carry weight. Back at the feast, the first course ends. Plates scraped. Wine flowing. Voices rise in rhythm. Then, it happens. A servant young, tall, too confident, clears a cushion too early, doesn't see the crumb, brushes it away. The guest sees and freezes. It was a sharp wheat edge, crust still intact, signaling favor from the host. Now it's gone. Now it looks like they weren't supposed to be there at all. The guest's eyes narrow. "I believe I was assigned another seat," he murmurs. The room stills. For a second, then the host laughs. "My dear Gellius, the wine has gone to your head? You're exactly where you belong." The laugh works. The room relaxes, but the damage is done. You know what comes next? Tomorrow, a passive-aggressive gift sent to the host's wife. A rumor started about Gellius's debts. A refusal to invest in the citrus grove deal. All because of one wiped-away crumb. Philo looks at you in awe. You didn't even move. You shake your head. Sometimes the storm brews itself, and behind your back, tucked into the folds of your tunic, you quietly grind another emergency crumb into powder, just in case. By the time the second course is served, roast thrushes with honeyed beets and a suspiciously enthusiastic bowl of garum. The seating plan has hardened like cooled wax. No one's shifting. Now, what's done is done. You lean quietly against a column in the back of the room, watching the game play out over golden grapes and simmering resentments. The guests believe the battle for status ends when the meal begins. They're wrong. Dinner is a battlefield. And tonight, the war is being waged in whispers and wine refills. You notice Lucius the Boaster hasn't spoken in 5 full minutes. That's a record. His seat under the oil lamp has turned against him. The glow makes him sweat. He keeps dabbing his brow, trying to maintain a smile. The illusion of favor is melting under heat. And across from him, a junior magistrate takes note. Subtle shift in power. No blood spilled, just glistening skin and a silent realization. Down the row, the senator's mistress is in bloom. She's received 3 direct questions from the host. Her responses are vague, amused, laced with innuendo. She hasn't touched her wine. That's the real trick. You almost want to clap, but your eyes are drawn, inevitably, back to the provincial official. He's quiet, not withdrawn, just observant. Every now and then, he raises a cup, watches others react. Occasionally, he tosses a seed or a crumb from his plate beneath the table, absent-minded. Maybe he's setting a counter-signal. The idea sends a chill up your back. What if he knows your system? What if he's sending his own? You consider the sesame-tipped loaf you gave him. He ate it without comment. Sure, but maybe that was the first move in his game. And now, with each flick of his hand, each casual gesture, he's drawing someone closer or pushing them away. Historians still debate whether Roman seating politics were a formal system or an improvisational art. There's no surviving handbook, no rules carved in stone, just scratched notes in servant diaries and the occasional joke in satire scrolls. But the effect, oh, it was real. Guests rose and fell by where they reclined. You remember one dinner, years ago, when a senator's son was seated near the foot of the couch instead of the head. Everyone thought it was an accident until he was disinherited the next morning. Coincidence? Sure. And maybe Mount Vesuvius was just a tiny cough from the earth. Tonight feels like that. Tension under the tablecloth. Smiles too practiced. The crumbs are holding for now. Then something shifts. You spot it instantly. 2 seats over from the mistress, a guest nudges a small bread wedge off the couch. Deliberate. He pretends not to notice, but you do. He's trying to erase the signal that placed him second tier. He wants a blank slate. Dangerous move. You hold your breath. Wait. The host sees it too. For a moment, his expression flattens. His fingers tighten around the handle of his goblet. Then he speaks too loudly. Oh, Gaius, you're sitting beside where I left that damned crumb. Was that barley? Or burnt millet? He chuckles. Careful, it might mean something. Everyone laughs, even Gaius. But the message is clear. We saw you. Philo is at your elbow again. Why do they do it? You glance down at him. Do what? Pretend they don't know. You sigh. Because admitting it means they're playing. And if they're playing, they can lose. That's the eternal rule of Roman dinners. Power must seem effortless. No one ever asks to be important. They just recline in the spot where the gods, or the breadcrumbs, placed them. Nearby, a dog sneezes. You glance toward the floor. No, not a dog. A rat. You tense. It sniffs the edge of the triclinium, beady eyes twitching toward the corner crust. The one you left for the lawyer with too many opinions. If it eats that, he'll think he was left out on purpose. You curse under your breath. Sliding along the shadows, you reach for a soft grape, whisper a silent apology to Bacchus, and toss it across the room. The rat flinches, darting toward the grape. Saved. Barely, you lean back against the wall, wiping sweat from your brow. And then you see it. The provincial official. He's smiling. Not at the food, not at the host. At you. Your breath catches. Does he see you? Did he see the grape? The rat. Or worse, does he know the code? You want to step back, disappear into the kitchen. But his eyes drop. His hand moves. He picks up a crust from his own plate and places it behind him, beside the cushion, mimicking your signals. He's responding. You don't move. Don't blink. He's playing your game now, and the table's no longer safe. The moment he places that crust behind his cushion, you know everything's changed. You were the one pulling threads from the dark, the silent cartographer, the ghost host behind the couch cushions. But now someone else is drawing on your map. Someone uninvited, and worse, someone visible. You stay still, hidden behind the marble column with its little chip near the base where wine boys keep bumping into it. You watch, you wait. He doesn't look your way again. But the signal was unmistakable. A crust, carefully set behind him. Crust down, crumb up. That's not an accident. That's a reply. Now the question hangs like smoke in the lamplight. What does it mean? You remember an old tale from your early days in the villa? When you were the one clearing plates and scrubbing amphorae, the older servants told stories of guests who played back. One even claimed a merchant from Alexandria once brought his own bread, marked with cinnamon lines to send his own coded messages to rivals across the table. Of course, the old man had added with a wink. He choked on a fig seed that same night. Probably a coincidence. Historians still argue whether this really happened. No written records, naturally, but the rumor never died. The idea that a guest might respond, might even outplay the servant arranging the seating. That's the kind of whisper that survives centuries. You study the crust again. It's short, tilted, dry, positioned just enough off-center to suggest ambiguity. Is it a peace offering? A claim of dominance? A parody? Or worse, what if he's testing you? Back in the kitchen, you'd memorize dozens of crumb formations, passed down through floury hands, the olive dip, the fig nest, the salt twist. But this is new. And that unsettles you. Philo, still hovering, follows your gaze. He moved bread. You nod slowly. Is that allowed? You almost laugh. Nothing's allowed. That's what makes it matter. Philo squints. So what now? You don't answer. You act. You step out from behind the column. Slow and casual. To the guests, you're just a servant fetching a dropped cloth. But inside, you're a strategist, redrawing the map. You move toward the official's couch, eyes low, feet soundless. At his side, a folded napkin lies askew. Perfect. You kneel to adjust it, and with your other hand, you brush the crust, not away, just slightly. You tilt it, rotate it 90 degrees. Crumb side facing the senator's mistress now, a counter move. You stand, bow, and retreat without a word. He doesn't react. Not immediately, but 5 heartbeats later, his hand lifts, fingers trace the curve of his cup. Then, casually, too casually, he turns, leans toward the mistress, whispers something. She laughs, light, polished, trained. But you see it. The shift. The game within the game. From the back wall, you recalibrate. That crust had meaning. And now, because of your adjustment, it meant alliance. You declared, with flour and silence, that he was tying himself to her. She accepted. And that meant the senator, her patron, her protector, was now in play. This is the danger of a good seating system. It starts as order, ends as ambition. Elsewhere in the room, Lucius wipes more sweat from his neck. His neighbor, the junior magistrate, pours him extra wine and says something that makes both of them chuckle. Another shift. The lawyer at the far end has now noticed that his crumb, the rye corner, is gone. The rat must have returned while your attention drifted. He now thinks he was excluded. His mouth is tight. He hasn't spoken in minutes. That will cost someone a favor tomorrow. Everywhere, tiny dramas bloom like mold in a hot kitchen. And you are the mold keeper. Still, you can't stop thinking about that crust. Why now? Why him? You duck into the servants' corridor, a cool, dark passage that smells like wine sediment and old lemons. You walk until you reach the small archive, a side room where napkin patterns and spice blends are recorded by hand. You open the scroll drawer. There's one old parchment you want, one no one uses anymore. The crumb cartography, not an official guide, not even legible in places, but it holds the oldest flour codes anyone bothered to write down. You find it, unroll it on the shelf, and trace your finger down the brittle surface. There, a formation. Dry crust, short side facing out, placed behind the cushion. The note beside it is faint, faded. Bread of silent thrones, used only by those who claim rule without crown. You stare, you read it again. A warning, a boast, a bluff. You roll the scroll tight, press it back into its spot, and exhale. Out in the triclinium, laughter rises. Cups clink. Someone drops a skewer. Another joke dies mid-air. And the official, he's no longer smiling. He's waiting. The laughter in the triclinium swells and softens like surf on a shoreline, never fully crashing, never fully still. But you hear none of it. Not really. Your ears are full of quiet flower math, of crust angles and whisper-weighted risk. The scroll called it Bread of Silent Thrones, a code used only by those who think they rule without needing to announce it. The man from the provinces placed that signal behind himself, and you turned it outward. Now he waits. That should worry you, but instead, it exhilarates you. You re-enter the room through the east arch, the one mostly used by wine pourers and lamp adjusters. Your footsteps are silent, practiced. Nobody turns. Nobody sees you, not even the people who need to. You scan the couches like a chessboard, searching for any unintended consequences. The senator's mistress leans slightly toward the provincial man now, fingering a cluster of green grapes with deliberate slowness. She's performed this act before. Half curiosity, half testing the wind. A new alliance is forming, and you started it with a flick of your wrist. Philo tugs at your tunic again. He's still trailing you like a puppy full of questions. You're starting to wonder if he's learning faster than you ever did. What if you hadn't turned it? You whisper back, then someone else would have. He frowns. Like who? You glance around the room, and then you see it. Another crust. Out of place. On the wrong couch. No servant placed it there. Not one of yours. You know every placement. You smell every loaf. But there it is, a curved edge of honeyed bread with anise seeds, sitting by the cushion of a guest who wasn't even supposed to attend. A visiting rhetorician. A talker. Not a power player. Yet suddenly, he matters. You narrow your eyes. This was planted. Someone's interfering. Historians still argue whether there were ever rival crumb keepers. Servants who tried to undermine the seating codes of rival houses or sabotage guests discreetly. There's one tale in the satires about a man who was banished from all Roman feasts for placing a sugar-dusted crust in front of a senator during Lent. But nobody can agree if that story was real or if it was just another joke in a long scroll of exaggerated dinner disasters. Still, you're looking at an unauthorized crumb. You move quietly toward it, reaching into your sleeve where you keep your emergency fig wipes. In one motion, you lean down and pretend to wipe the cushion. Then swap the rogue crust with a flat, coin-shaped crumb from your stash, a nothing bread, a neutralizer. The rhetorical guest will be confused, maybe flattered, maybe paranoid, but the real message erased. When you rise, the provincial official is watching you again, and this time, he nods. Not large, not theatrical, just enough for you to know. He saw the switch. He knew it wasn't yours, which means there's a third player. This dinner is now officially more crowded than it appears. You step back into the shadows. You've lost count of how many signals are flying across this room now. The seating plan is holding, but barely. If this continues, something is going to crack, not tonight, maybe, but soon. Across the room, Lucius is speaking again, voice loud and wobbly. He's had too much wine. He slams a fist on the table to emphasize something pointless, how he saw a gladiator bite off his own ear, or some other tavern-born fantasy. His neighbor smiles tightly. The magistrate sighs. Philo whispers, "Is he the next to fall?" You smile. He's already falling. The trick is making him think it's his idea. Then a voice cuts through the air like a dagger. "Excuse me?" says the provincial official, raising his goblet. Silence falls, not full silence. The lamps still crackle. Someone coughs, but the mood contracts. "I'd like to toast," he says, "to the unseen hands who make evenings like this run smoother than they ever seem." He looks directly at you. Now the whole room turns. It's the ultimate breach. Guests don't acknowledge servants, not unless something's gone wrong, not unless they're trying to upend the rules. You bow mechanically, then step backward. One pace. Two. The host raises an eyebrow. "Gracious of you," he says smoothly. "But surely, we don't need to drag the flour into the wine." Chuckles ripple out, but tension lingers. You retreat into the corridor again, heart thudding like a pestle on stone. He's not just playing the game. He's naming it, and now he's using you as a pawn or maybe a rival. Either way, your invisibility is gone, and somewhere in that room, someone else is scattering signals that aren't yours. The rules are slipping, and the crumbs are no longer quiet. The corridor is colder now, not because the air has changed, but because you have something about being named, singled out in front of that room full of silk-draped schemers, has tightened the world around your ribs. You press your back against the wall, palm against the cool plaster. It smells faintly of wax and time and something deeper, something like old panic sealed into stone. Philo stays beside you, but he doesn't speak. That's new. Even a boy that young knows when a line's been crossed. He saw it. They all did. The provincial official didn't just toast the host or the gods. He toasted you. The unseen hand, the keeper of the crumbs, the man behind the curtain who wasn't supposed to exist, and the others, they laughed. But not real laughter. No, it was the kind of laughter people use when they're waiting to see who dies first. You rub your temple, thinking through every crumb placed tonight, every shift, every line, every twist of crust and flake of flour, and then your mind stumbles back to the rogue crumb on the rhetorician seat. Who planted it? You pace. It's not a prank. Not now. Not after that move. Someone else in this room understands the code or enough of it to imitate. Maybe a disgruntled servant. Maybe a political agent. Maybe even the mistress. She's clever enough. You stop pacing. Or maybe him. What if the provincial official isn't just playing? What if he created the third signal? That's when you remember, not all bread is equal. There are types of crust only one bakery in the Aventine produces, a bakery owned by a former senator's freedmen. You've used their loaves only twice. Once for a wedding, once for a funeral. The crumb on the rhetorician's cushion, that exact shape, that faint honey glaze, his bakery. You close your eyes. So, he brought his own bread, which means he knew before the invitation, before the seating, before the host even planned tonight. Historians still debate how early Roman dinner seating systems were weaponized politically. There are accounts scattered across letters and legal complaints of guests planting messages in their own food, of chefs being bribed to undercook meat as subtle threats. But what you're seeing now isn't subtle. It's a full-blown declaration. The official came to this dinner with bread in his pocket and strategy in his mouth. And then you hear it. Raised voices. Back in the triclinium, you rush forward, pulling Philo behind you like a shadow. Through the archway, you glimpse the scene unfolding with slow horror. Lucius is standing, not upright, wobbling, slurring, pointing at the mistress. I see what you're doing. He growls, whispering to him, trying to angle your way back into favor. What did you promise this time? Another cousin's marriage. Another lapdog with land. The room is dead silent. She stares at him, eyes cold as stone. Her wine cup, untouched all evening, now trembles just slightly in her fingers. The host rises, slow, graceful, but his voice is steel. Lucius, sit, now. But Lucius doesn't move. He's staring at the provincial official now. You think you can walk in here and what charm your way through Rome's back door? You don't even belong at this table. You don't remember placing a crumb for him. You did. You must have. Didn't you? He laughs once, soft and terrible. That's the problem. Lucius, he says, you're still pretending this table belongs to anyone. Then he reaches under his own cushion, lifts another crust. This one dark, heavy, pitted, and drops it onto the floor. It lands with a flat sound, a thud, not a crumble. The room gasps. This isn't a signal anymore. It's a gauntlet. You almost whisper it aloud. He brought more than one. Philo grabs your hand. He's trying to start something. You nod. He already did. You rush to the host. Quiet. Urgent. Whisper in his ear. Careful to let no one else hear. There's more bread in that man's tunic than on your table. The host's jaw tightens. He smiles. Thank you. And then the orders begin. Servants move. Wine is poured faster. A new plate arrives, steaming, distracting. The host claps his hands, laughing loudly, slapping Lucius on the shoulder as if nothing just happened. He's diffusing the room with every trick in the scroll. Bread be damned. Eyes on the duck. Drink the wine. Swallow the tension. But the damage is done. You watch as the provincial official reclines again. Content. Victorious. Not because he won something tonight, but because he showed you he could. And now the crumb game isn't yours alone. It's a battlefield. And you're no longer the only general. You don't sleep that night. Not really. You lie on your straw mat in the servant quarters, listening to the slow breath of 12 other bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder, each one dreaming of wine dregs or leftover meat or nothing at all. But your mind, it's still in the triclinium, replaying every second of the bread war that just unfolded. Every crunch, every bite, every planted crust. And one name keeps slipping through your thoughts like oil over marble. Gavius, the provincial official, that's what they're calling him now. But there are no family scrolls, no staff, no history. He showed up with status and silence. And bread. You rise before the sun. You dress in the dark. You walk through the kitchen empty now, except for a cooling hearth and a fig peel stuck to the floor and push open the back door. The alley behind the villa is still thick with the smell of last night's olive oil. The city is asleep. But you're hunting answers. You make your way to the market, past the fishmonger's stones and the weaver's shuttered stalls. At the far edge, where the scent of yeast thickens the air, stands the bakery. That bakery, the one you recognize the rogue crust from, the one that shouldn't have been involved. It's already open. Inside, the oven master, an ex-legionary with one good eye and a shoulder scar. He blames on either Gauls or goats, greets you with a grunt. You lean in. Did anyone order the honey anise loaves yesterday? He pauses, frowns. You're not supposed to know about those. You smile. I'm not supposed to exist. He grunts again, shrugs. Tall man. Wore a ring with no crest. Paid in gold. Didn't haggle. Said he needed 7 pieces. Not for eating. You nod. Did he say his name? The baker thinks Gavius, or said someone called him Gavius. That tracks. Did he say why he needed the bread? The baker grins. A gap-toothed crescent. Said it was for a map no one would see. You leave before the dough finishes rising. Back at the villa, the staff is already stirring. The host hasn't rung yet, but the mistress is awake, pacing the garden. They say, muttering about men with schemes in their teeth. She'll be fine. She's always fine. But you're no longer sure you are. You've been the map maker too long. The silent ruler. You've controlled every dinner like an orchestra. And now someone else is not just playing along. They're composing alternate notes. You head to the archives again. This time, not to look at crumbs, but at names. There's a shelf half moldy, half myth, full of servant records, former guests, disgraced couriers. You sift through wax tablets and cracked scrolls until one sticks to your hand. A list of servant scandals from a decade ago. One entry catches your eye. Lucius Gavius Thrano, dismissed from Senator Malleus's house. Accused of manipulating seating customs during funerary rites, no formal charges. Disappeared. You stare at the name Thrano. That wasn't in the introductions last night. He's not just mimicking your system. He used to run one. You sit back. He's not the first to do what you do. He's a ghost, an exiled crumb keeper, one of yours, in a twisted way. And now he's returned. You close the scroll, hands shaking slightly. The truth itches beneath your skin. He came not for the food, not for the favor. He came for you because there can't be 2 maps, not in the same room. Philo finds you later in the storeroom, still clutching the scroll. Are we in trouble? He asks, eyes wide. You look at him, really look at him. He's learning fast, too fast. You remember being that young, that curious. No, you whisper, not yet, but he's better than us. You shake your head. He's not better. Then, what is he? You close your eyes and whisper, returned. By the time the oil lamps are lit for that evening's meal, you've already swept the triclinium floor twice. Not because it needed it, because you needed it. The rhythmic scrape of the broom lets you think, lets you plan. Yesterday, you were the ghost behind the feast, the one who built the map, the guide, the system. Today, you are something else entirely, a market figure, a rival, a name. He named you, and in Rome, names are currency. Silence is safety. You've spent your whole life living behind folded napkins and dustless corners. But now, you're part of the story. Philo walks beside you, holding the linen roll of tonight's crumbs. You've taught him how to fold it so it doesn't shed flour into the air. He's practiced. Eager, unaware that tonight's game isn't about seating. It's about survival. Same guests as last night, he asks. You nod. With one addition, his eyes widen. Who? The crumb cartographer. Philo blinks. That's not a real title. You raise a brow. Neither is assistant to the seeding flower strategist. And yet here you are. He grins, then swallows it. Because he knows, the air is different tonight. Heavy, like dough that never quite rises. The host requested a smaller gathering, just friends, he said, which in Roman means just the people I need to keep an eye on. The couches are rearranged, tighter, closer, no shadows to hide in. Gavius will see everything. You run your fingers across the linen drapes, eyes flicking to the window. You consider placing no crumbs at all. Let the guests scramble. Let the silence eat them alive. But no, that's not how you win. You open the roll. The loaves tonight are experimental. You had them baked at dawn. Each one uses a different type of flour. Einkorn, ammer, spelt, and even a rare nut-mixed dough banned in some temples for causing strange dreams. They won't know what hit them. You kneel beside the couches, placing each crumb with almost ritualistic care. Einkorn wedge for the host suggests memory, tradition, firmness. Soft spelt for the senator's mistress, flexible, fertile, subtle. A crumb with burnt edges for Lucius, he needs to feel the heat. And then, the trap. You place nothing for Gavius. Not one crust, not one speck of flour, just an empty curve of silk where his signal should be. A ghost cushion. Let's see what he makes of that. Historians still argue about negative seating in Roman culture, the absence of an invitation, the space left untouched. Some say it was a punishment. Others claim it was a perverse honor, the kind of blank slate reserved for those whose status could not be contained by symbols. You've decided to test the theory. The guests begin to arrive. Again, no one mentions the bread, but their eyes flick to the cushions, to the crumbs, to the careful spacing between one loaf and the next. They pretend not to read your map, but they follow it all the same. Lucius winces at the burnt crust, mutters something about overbaked staff. The mistress runs her fingers over the soft spelt and lets out the smallest, most satisfied sigh. The host reclines against his einkorn like it's a badge. Then Gavius enters. Late, alone. He walks slowly, surveying the room like a man walking into his own trap. Then he looks at you. You meet his eyes. And for once, neither of you smiles. He walks toward his couch, the empty one. The one with no crumb, no crust, no signal. He pauses, looks down, and sits anyway, as if to say, I don't need your maps. Then he lifts something from his sleeve, a small, round piece of bread. Sesame. Glazed. Your mouth goes dry. He places it gently behind his cushion. The room doesn't notice, but you do. It's a challenge. You marked him as ghost. He reappears. You gave him nothing. He brings his own language. Across the table, the host glances toward you, one brow raised. Translation. Do you have this under control? You nod. Translation. Not yet, but I will. And as the first course is served, you slip away not out of fear, but to begin preparing what comes next. Because Gavius may be clever, but he forgot one thing. You still know this villa better than anyone. And ghosts don't own houses. You descend into the undercellar with a lantern in one hand and a flour bag tied tight under the other arm. Most servants don't come down here. The air's too still, the stairs uneven, and the walls whisper when they shouldn't. But this place, this cold stretch of stone beneath the villa, it holds the oldest maps, not on parchment, on memory. Because before you were a crumb keeper, before you learned to tuck coated loaves behind the cushions of generals and mistresses, you were a floor sweeper. And back then, you found things. Little patterns scratched into wine crates, chalk marks on the wall behind the amphorae. You didn't understand them at first, but eventually you realized there had been another before you, another mapmaker, long gone, long erased, but not forgotten. You pull aside the sackcloth curtain that hides the western alcove. Behind it, etched into the wall with oil char and soot, is the pattern, a full triclinium layout. Couch by couch, bread by bread, each loaf drawn with symbols, some obvious round equals favor, some obscure, a wedge with dots is betrayal. You study it now, lantern light flickering. This is what Gavius thinks he's rediscovered. But this is older than both of you. Your finger traces the edge of a faded spiral, a formation called the silent spiral. It was only used once. According to an old woman you once knew in the outer villa, it reorders the social cues mid-meal, shifts favor from center to corner. It confuses the bold and exalts the overlooked. Dangerous. Perfect! You memorize the layout. Tie the flour bag tighter, then climb back up the steps, not as a servant, but as something else entirely. A cartographer reclaiming his land. Back in the triclinium, the second course is on the table. Pickled dormice, mulid pears, spiced lentils fanned across golden plates like someone tried to draw the night sky with beans. The mood has shifted. No one's talking much. The bread signals from earlier are holding. Lucius is sulking into his duck thigh. The mistress is watching everyone like a chess player 2 moves ahead. Gavius, relaxed. Too relaxed. He knows he won the last round, which is exactly what you needed. You kneel near the wine boy, whisper something. He passes it to the hostess, a soft nod, a flick of the wrist, and now the third course arrives. Grapes, goblets, and gluten. Literally, it's the traditional bread offering, 1 per guest, served on separate trays. But here's the twist. The bread isn't bread. It's carved, each one, shaped, styled, baked into a form. For the hostess, a rose bloom of sourdough, symbol of elegance. For Lucius, a cracked crust shaped like a flailing fish. For the mistress, a delicate twist resembling a laurel wreath. And for Gavius, nothing, just a bowl, empty. The servant pauses in front of him, confused, then looks to you. You nod. Silently, they move on. The host makes a show of chuckling. Gavius, no appetite tonight. And Gavius, damn him, smiles. Empty bowls often hold the most meaning. He says, the guests laugh, nervous, uncertain. You walk behind the couches, pretending to adjust a lantern. Then pause behind Gavius. You reach into your flour bag and drop 1 grain, just 1, onto the table behind him. A speck, a whisper, a signal. He sees it, and his smile fades. Historians still argue whether grain signals were real or symbolic. A single oat, a seed, a pepper flake left near a guest's seat. Some say it meant judgment from the divine. Others insist it was a call for silence. But there's one scroll almost forgotten that calls it the gathering of winds, a reminder that change is coming. You've just sent that message. Philo appears beside you. He's quiet now. You nod. The game's not over. You whisper, do we win? No. You murmur, stepping into the kitchen. We confuse. Because power in Rome doesn't shift with noise. It shifts with doubt. And tonight, every guest will go home wondering, why was Gavius denied bread? What did the single grain mean? And most importantly, who is truly running this house? You close the kitchen door behind you and begin shaping tomorrow's loaves. By morning, the city is whispering. You can feel it in the way the olive cart rattles past the villa gate too slowly, the way the washerwomen lean into each other at the corner cistern. No one says bread out loud, but you hear it between syllables, in the word placement, in the phrase dinner went long, in the widening eyes of a courier who sees you carrying flour through the hall. The single grain behind Gavius changed everything. You didn't insult him. You marked him, and no one knows what it meant. That's the power. That's the game. You're back in the kitchen, hunched over a marble slab, shaping loaves, while the heat from the oven rises in damp waves. Today's batch is different, smaller, precise. You're building the silent spiral, the one from the cellar walls, the one nobody uses anymore. Philo watches your hands move. You're not writing a map. He says, you're writing a riddle. You smile. Good. The villa has another dinner tonight. This time, not in the triclinium, but in the pergola, outdoors, under pergola beams wrapped in ivy, where the light changes as the sun dips, and nothing stays stable long enough to catch its breaths. Gavius will be there again. Of course he will. This time, no invitation was sent. He simply informed the host that he'd be attending. That's how confident he is, or how cornered. Historians still wonder if Rome's political games were more theatrical in private than in the Senate itself. Some argue real governance happened at tables, not in temples, where bread and wine served as ink and scroll. You've always believed that. Now you're living it. You tuck the last-shaped roll into the cloth-lined basket, a narrow strip of rye with 7 sesame seeds arranged like stars. Tonight, it'll go to the youngest guest, a scholar's apprentice who's never been seated near the center. He won't understand what it means, but others will. The signal is watch the ignored. Even now, you're shifting the spiral. That evening, the guests arrive slowly. There's wind in the air, warm, restless, unsettling, the kind that rattles goblets before hands touch them. The pergola is lit with citronella torches, a nod to tradition, a veil for tension. The seats tonight are couches laid along curved stone benches. No drapes, no walls, nowhere to hide. The bread placement happens in open air. You walk the arc of the pergola, basket in hand, placing each loaf one by one. A twisted barley ring for the hostess, a date-stuffed rye for the magistrate, a cracked wheat spiral for Lucius, his edges fraying, just like the crust. A hollowed wheat dome for the senator's mistress, honey inside, nothing outside. Then, for Gavius, a single small square, dense, heavy, flat. It doesn't look like bread. Because it isn't, it's salt-baked dough, completely inedible. It crumbles if broken, but otherwise, it holds shape, like a truth that can't be swallowed. You place it in front of his seat, gently, and step back. Gavius arrives last. He walks slowly, a silk wrap over his shoulder, his hands loose, like nothing matters. He scans the pergola, sees the layout, sees you, and this time, he bows, just slightly, an acknowledgement, maybe even respect. Then he takes his seat, touches the salt bread, doesn't eat it, doesn't move it, just lets it be. That's the smartest thing he's done all week. The meal unfolds like slow poetry, quieter than usual, less laughter, more stolen glances. Every guest is waiting to see what the crumbs mean. No one says it aloud, but they lean toward their bread before they speak. They glance at the neighboring crust before making an offer or a joke. The apprentice. He's glowing. First course. He's ignored. Second course. The hostess asks his opinion. By the third, he's being poured more wine than Lucius. The spiral is working. The center of attention is shifting outward, and no one can tell why, not even Gavius. Because this one wasn't written in crumbs, it was written in absence. In the hollow spaces between symbols, Philo whispers beside you. You've turned the table. You nod. Slowly. No, you say, I've turned them. And across the pergola, Gavius looks down at his salt brick. Then quietly he picks it up and places it beside his cushion. Not behind. Not under. Beside. Open. Seen. A signal of surrender. Historians still debate whether Gavius Thrino ever truly lost control during his later years. Some scrolls insist he died quietly in a villa by the sea. Others claim he returned to the provinces and ran banquets until his death. But one entry half-burned, half-erased mentions a dinner under a pergola, where the host never spoke, the guests never knew, and the power shifted without a single raised voice. You were there. You made that shift happen. And now, you walk quietly into the kitchen and begin breaking your own map, piece by piece, because the real power is not in holding the code, it's in knowing when to let it go. The next morning, you do something unthinkable. You bake no bread, the oven stays cool, the flour stays sealed, you sharpen no knives, you soak no crusts. Philo watches you from the corner, puzzled, bouncing one of yesterday's stale barley knots in his palm like it might still carry meaning. You're not planning, he finally says. No, you reply, I'm watching. Because now that the spiral has completed, now that power has shifted outward, pulled toward the margins like stars in slow collapse, you're not the cartographer anymore. You're the horizon itself, and horizons don't move. They wait. The villa is oddly quiet today. No formal dinner, just a light luncheon for close friends. Of course. Close friends in Roman terms includes political rivals, ex-lovers, and two men who once dueled over a grapevine dispute. Still, no seating chart is requested, no bread map. The host says it's informal. You know better. It's a test. You carry the wine in yourself. No assistants, no tray boys. You place each goblet carefully, making no distinctions, equal pours, equal placements. And yet, you watch as the guests hesitate. They glance under the cups. They tilt plates to see if a wedge of something has been hidden under lettuce. They're looking for crumbs and finding none, which is a message all by itself. Gavius sits with them, quiet. He hasn't placed any bread today either. But he does wear the same robe as last night, plain, gray, unembroidered. A choice. A symbol. Across the table, Lucius complains about the lack of pickled radish. No one responds. The mistress speaks of a temple ritual involving doves and bronze coins. Two guests nod. One jots something down. The apprentice, once seated at the edges, is now the first asked to speak. And Gavious. He watches. Not you, not them, just the table. And near the end of the meal, when the cheese is served and the wine watered down, he speaks. One of the strangest feelings, he says, is realizing you've been playing a game you didn't invent. And worse, realizing you played it well and still lost. No one replies. The wind rustles the ivy. You move to clear his cup. As you do, he touches your wrist. Not hard, not long, just enough to hold you still. He speaks low, for your ears only. I knew the code. He says, even helped build it. Years ago, you say nothing. I thought it was mine. Still, you're silent. Then he lets go. You lift his goblet. Walk away. No fanfare. Philo meets you near the kitchen. What did he say? You shake your head? He returned what wasn't his. Historians never mention what Gavious did after that lunch. He vanishes from the records. Some say he retired. Some say he became a priest. One wild theory suggests he became a street poet, carving verse into loaves and selling them near the harbor. You prefer that version. It feels earned. You place his goblet in the wash basin, its rim stained faintly with wine. You don't scrub it. You leave it there marked, a signal not made of crumbs, but of absence. Later that day, a new guest arrives. A woman, tall, quiet, with sun-scorched skin and a way of glancing at the couches like they might bow to her. She says nothing, requests nothing, just stands in the atrium while the host pretends not to fidget. She's from Alexandria, Philo whispers, a priest's daughter. Some say she reads dreams. You nod, and watch as her eyes settle not on the host, not on the statues, but on you. She doesn't smile. She simply says, I hear you used to speak in bread. And just like that, the game begins again. You don't answer her right away. You could. A clever retort, a knowing nod. Even silence would suffice. And silence is sometimes louder than applause in this house. But no, this woman from Alexandria, this priest's daughter who claims to read dreams doesn't need your cleverness. She needs your attention. So you nod, just once, and walk away. She watches you leave. That night, the villa hosts no formal meal, but the guest list has doubled. No scroll was sent, no herald shouted, and yet they arrive. From side alleys and garden paths, they trickle in minor poets, idle cousins of senators, two former mistresses of men now in exile. Even the fishmonger's son with the gossip itch shows up with olives and excuses. They're not here for food. They're here for her. And you suspect, for you, because word has spread, not just about Gavious, but about the system, the maps, the signals, the spiral. They don't understand it, not fully, but they feel it, and they want in. You watch from the second-floor gallery, shadowed by ivy and twilight. As the woman moves through the atrium, she doesn't recline, doesn't drink. She simply stands beside the old marble brazier, hands clasped behind her back, and listens. And when she speaks, it's always to the guest who wasn't just speaking, always against the current. She's shifting attention. She's rearranging the invisible layout of power. Without a single crumb, Philo finds you just before midnight. His tunic is dusty, and his fingers are red from pressing wine-soaked linens into shape. He looks up at you, breathless. She didn't place anything, he says. No loaves, no signals. But everyone followed her. He nods, like she built her own map, just without markers. You sit beside him on the floor. She's not playing the game. Philo frowns. Then, what's she doing? You take a deep breath. She's telling a new one. Historians would later call this era in villa culture the whispered shift, a period when physical signals crusts. Wedge placements gave way to subtler cues. Posture, tone, what wasn't said, what wasn't placed. Some believe it was the beginning of the decline. Others call it an evolution. You watch her now, sipping water from a clay cup, nodding to the exiled mistress, gently guiding the room like a ship's rudder that no one notices is moving. And you feel it. The code is no longer yours alone. You don't fear it. You feel relieved, because maps were never meant to last. They're meant to be rewritten. And tonight, you rewrite your own. You enter the garden. Torchlight flickers off fig leaves. Cicadas whisper in the vines. You approach her slowly. She turns, smiles. Just once. You hand her something. Not a loaf, not a crust. A seed. Barley. Dried, still whole. A symbol not of power, not of placement, but of beginning. She takes it and places it behind her ear. No words pass between you, because for the first time in your life, you're not writing the map, you're walking it. The next morning, no bread is baked in the villa, not by you, not by anyone. And yet, the air smells full of expectation, of quiet design, of something rising unseen. The atrium floor is polished. The garden is swept. The triclinium lies empty, but no one asks why. No one needs to, because the new signals don't sit on cushions anymore. They move in posture, in who speaks last, in who arrives early, and who arrives just late enough to be noticed. You no longer carry a basket. You carry a glance. You no longer press crumbs into cushions. You press questions into people's silences, and they respond. The apprentice who once hovered at the edge now reclines where the host used to sit, not because you placed him there, but because he learned to read what you didn't place. Gavious is gone, left in the night. Took nothing. Left behind a coin on a windowsill and a slice of stale crust still shaped like a square. You left it there. Philo kneels beside you in the pergola courtyard, still clinging to yesterday's linen roll, though there's no need for it now. I memorize the whole spiral. He says, every crumb, every wedge. You nod, then forget it. His mouth opens, closes, but forget it. You repeat, gently. If you know it too well, you'll miss the new shapes. He looks away, uncertain. You don't push. He'll learn. Or he won't. Maps are only useful if the world stands still, and nothing in Rome stays still. Not power, not hunger, not bread. The priest's daughter walks past the fig tree in silence. She wears the barley seed still tucked behind her ear, not as a statement, as a habit, as if it's always been there. She glances at you only once, and that's enough, because you know the torch has passed. Not because she took it, but because you let it fall, and she picked it up with grace. There's no dinner tonight, no feast, just leftovers. Guests take figs from the bowl and drift into the night like sleepwalkers with half-finished poems on their tongues. And no one notices there were no assigned places, because everyone sat where they were seen. No crumbs, no crusts, only space. And from that space order, you sweep the floor before sleep. Philo has already gone. You don't call him back. You pass the triclinium once more and pause. On the far couch, where Lucius once sat under a dripping lamp, a single sesame seed lies on the linen. You didn't put it there. You smile. You leave it, and you close the door softly behind you. And now, as the last lanterns dim and the night thickens like a hush across the courtyard, your breath slows. The game of crumbs, of couches and quiet empires, dissolves into the folds of memory. The flour has settled. The maps have faded, and the rules. Oh, those ever-crumbling rules now drift like ash into the still air of early dawn. You find yourself not at the edge of a strategy, but at the edge of sleep. The sounds of sandals, of whispered plans, of careful laughter have softened to nothing. Even the seeds have stopped shifting. You are no longer the ghost behind the bread. You are no longer the hand that draws the circle. You are the circle itself. And in this circle, there are no winners, no losers, just guests passing through. Just signals, meant only to be read once and forgotten gently. Let the games rest. Let the flower rest. Let your fingers unclench and your shoulders sink back into whatever couch you've made your own tonight. Maybe you're in a small apartment, maybe a train car, maybe a borrowed bed beside a cracked window with the night air slipping through. Wherever you are, the map no longer needs you, because you were never just reading the story. You were the story. And now, it's time to close the scroll. Breathe in, breathe out, sleep. Cartographer, your crumbs have spoken.